Welcome to the most important week of the year for the podcast industry. Welcome to Podcast Movement 2025.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Quincy DeVries. I'm the head of content production at Quill. We're an award-winning branded podcast agency and co-host. And co-host is a podcast analytics and audience insight platform for brands and agencies. So thank you for taking the time to join us today for our session, Cracking the Attribution Code, Measuring the ROI of Branded Content. So as we know, everyone wants podcast ROI, but in a medium that's built for connection, not necessarily clicks, measuring success can be tricky, as many of you probably know already. Branded podcasts especially often thrive on long-term brand impact rather than short-term performance metrics, and proving that value takes a different kind of measurement model. If you're here from a brand and you're justifying ROI to someone higher up, I know how tricky it can be, and I know that the panelists today are going to help you dig into how to do that. So I'm really excited to introduce our fantastic panelists. First, I'm going to have you wave when I introduce you, so that everyone knows who you are. We have Sharon Taylor. She's the EVP Podcast and Content Delivery at Triton Digital. We have Bart Roselli, Senior Vice President of Growth at Oxford Road. And finally, we have Steph Andrews, who works with me here. She's the VP of Product at Quill and co-host. And our moderator for our discussion today is Bryan Barletta. He's a partner at Sounds Profitable. And I know that you're all going to really enjoy the conversation today. These are some great panelists. So Bryan, over to you.
Thank you so much. Sharon, I don't think I'm going to let you get away with that. From the time that this was planned to now, what's your title?
No, reverse Uno. What's your plan for podcast movement now?
New question.
No, so I was AVP of podcasting, and now I am Chief Revenue Officer of Triton Digital.
Which is awesome. Congratulations. Well deserved.
Thank you. No, I'm quite British about it. Please stop. No.
Okay, so thinking about attribution, thinking about branded content, I think that are like branded podcasts, that's a different angle for this. I mean, there are aspects of attribution we can talk about. There are aspects about return on investment for advertisements we can talk about, but branded podcast is really where we're going to center on this. Before we do dive into that specific view, I think where it's 2025, I started with podcast attribution 2015, 2016, so we're about a decade into it. What's still misunderstood about it? I want to start with an understanding of like, what aren't people getting? Where were they getting hung up on it? And that's open to everyone.
I mean, I'll start. I think what's important now is consumption habits are very different from 10 years ago. We obviously know about the massive growth that we're seeing with video, but I think what's really getting lost, and we have to deal with it all the time, is you have to understand what the goals are, and everyone can be like, oh, I need to hit this CPA. That's great. But how is the client tracking that? They have likely a media mix model, which you don't have full access into. So if you don't understand how that works, you might be butting up against that. And let's face it, media mix models are primarily driven based on last click, linear, et cetera. So it already starts out kind of poo-pooing podcasts right off the bat. So I think understanding before you launch, and even forget just the vanity metrics we've talked about for a decade, how are you going to measure branded content? And are you looking at it from, oh, I want to learn what response rates are going to be in a month? I'm like, that's not branded content. Like, you have to change brand perception. You have to do it over time. I think the size and comprehensiveness of the product matters too. Like, is it not something that's impulse and you understand what it is, or does you need to tell a story and you need to tell why it's really impactful in your model?
Yeah, I think when it comes to something that we talked about with our clients all the time is around podcasting isn't an audio medium, it's an ecosystem of content. And so when we're thinking about the return, your return needs to be measured in terms of the ecosystem that it is being channeled out to, right? So you have to think about, is my newsletter performing better? Is my social media is more engaged because I'm putting out these key moments or snippets from a particular episode of the podcast? Am I driving more traffic to my website because of the blog or transcripts? That came from the podcast, right? And so when you're investing in podcasts as a medium, it's not necessarily just about creating a story and creating this long-form audio content. That's great, and consumption, all these metrics that we've been talking about is great, but also if you can create that ecosystem and measure it across all of these other channels, your impact is going to be so much larger than just the audio medium itself.
I would say there's still a ton that people don't know about attribution. Like I deal with publishers of all sizes kind of day in and day out. And even 10 years on, I still get people who are like, what is that? Like, what is these? Like everyone here, show of hands, gets it fully, like full bottle, which is a very Australian saying, like on like attribution or
Did we
came
get
to
a
learn.
single hand
No.
race? I don't think so.
I mean, I think it's quite surprising the amount of people that are still like, hey, I'm ready to take the next step with my show, or like advertisers that are coming into the space and are like, what is it? What do we do?
Yeah, and because it's such a wide term, right? I mean, I ran a campaign once that was driving to like a Canadian Hulu type thing, and they're like, attribution was terrible. And I was like, why? And they're like, well, after the 20-day trial period, nobody paid for it. I was like, well, we got people to the trial. That's on you, right? Like, and so trying to figure out like where that line is. I hope that laugh was for us. That was a really good one. Trying to figure out where that line is, everybody has a different view on it. And I think a lot of what we're talking about here is attention, right? With branded content and attribution. Attribution is like the effectiveness of an ad often. But when we think about here with branded content, we're talking about, was the production of this content valuable for the brand? How do we measure that?
And you would hope that the LTV is commensurate to that as well. Short term might be different types of AOVs, which then changes your financial models, and then also what your CPA is. So you have to think about it not myopically in the short term using the vanity metrics, but also the very long tail. If you're doing that and somebody says, oh, I'm going to measure this in 2 or 3 months, you're like, it's not really branded content, or let's reset the expectations of what you think the output's going to be.
Well, I like a lot about how you're thinking about these things. I think we're going to be able to dig in from your ad expertise on this too. I want to jump over for something for Steph with the analytics side. So co-host is incredibly skilled with the analytics that they're building out for brands and publishers. Any publisher can use the platform, but you guys have really found a home for brands on the platform. What metrics are people missing, right? Because we're talking, when we talk about attribution, a lot of us are talking about pixel-based attribution. We're talking about conversion. We're talking about instant, pretty much here. But we're now talking about attention, lifetime value, and all of those things. What are the metrics that people are not paying attention to that we need to shine a spotlight on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was interesting because when I started in the industry back as a producer, God knows, a long time ago, it was really hard for us to understand or to give people a picture of what the ROI was of their shows. Brands would come to us and then we would be able to prove their shows based on total downloads, unique listeners, and basically try and tell a story around why that is valuable to them, which didn't really make a lot of sense to brands that we were working with. Especially when you're working with like the larger like Fortune 500s of the world, they're like, okay, but who is listening? Why do I care, right? So when we built out Co-Host, that was actually part of the vision, was to fill that gap. Was, okay, how do we see not just how many listeners are coming and how engaged they are, but who are they? What demographics are they? What age range? What job role do they have? What seniority? What companies, industries are listening, right? So that was really important for us. So I think when brands are coming to us, that's really the thing that stands out, is it's not just about, yes, bringing in audiences and bringing in listeners. That's great, but are they qualified? That's something that we're really good at.
I want to pass over to Bart on continuing on this topic here, the brands and the things that they're looking at in advertising as well as for branded content. Do you think it's fair to say that for a while there we were really pushing like reach and as many touch points as possible and lower price point and all of that, and thinking about the near term as fast as possible? But is it fair to say that it feels like there's a shift back towards that deeper integration?
I think that's where we're like headed. Also with video not really truly being able to be tracked yet, it kind of forces the angle as consumption habits continue to shift that direction. So, hey, if video had to do it, fine, that's great. Obviously, we want to get that going, but obviously when you look at people like, oh, I want to be in podcasts, like sometimes you get that general question. It's like, well, what does that mean? Are you talking about just the top 50 in PodTrack? Because that's very different. Are you talking about the thousands and tens of thousands that are different levels? But you're talking about reaching somebody who has a niche audience and has that high engagement. It's appointment listening. It's what P1 listeners used to call back in radio from that perspective. Like, this is appointment listening, their dedicated time from that side. So I think I do see that happening in that direction, and I think we all together can push that swell, because if you're looking at it myopically, you're gonna get one fraction of it. And now when people are thinking about audio and influencer, be in 4 or 5 channels, and if you're a co-host, etc., if you're not measuring the sphere of influence, you're really not giving that podcast its fair due.
Is that a unique thing for podcasting? Sometimes I feel like we're trying to educate people about all of advertising from our small vantage point, and I think a lot of people don't go to other advertising conferences and whatnot there. Do you think that this is unique to us, or other channels having to advocate and explain all of these different aspects? This is open to anyone.
Yeah.
I think they all, like for many years, we've all gotten up on stage, and if it's not an attribution, it's a measurement or the download. And like I've gone to a few non-podcasting conferences in my time, they're all doing the same thing. Everyone's just trying to like solve the same problems. We just have a very specific medium that is straddling traditional and digital media, and so it's held to digital standards. Yeah. And then like I remember when prefix and attribution first came in, we were like, whoa, this is different, because it's like we don't really know, it's a bit of a black box. And then as the box gets cracked open, as video comes in and you get all of those juicy video metrics, I think we're all kind of figuring it out, and I think all industries are having the same kinds of problems. We're just a little unique because we do a little bit of everything.
It's really telling that as things move back, it kind of feels like to a little bit more of the baked in or hands-on or influencer stuff. It's not that programmatic didn't work or the technology worked. It's that like, yeah, we nailed that. We did the best we could with what we have. Buyers want to go back to this. Instead of, as we were fighting and building it, which I think we've been pretty solid for like a year or two on that side, we've had to justify it. No, it is doing as much as possible. I understand you might want more data in other places, but now that like the attention's off of it, everyone's like, yeah, it's fine. I'll spend some money over there, but can you dig into this other thing? And now we're chasing attribution on video, right? We're chasing all of these other things that we don't have insights to. And just to highlight something, like Spotify's choices for video turn your RSS feed into a cached product that they own with proprietary data, right? They're managing it there. None of the attribution and stuff that we've worked hard as an industry to make available is accessible on those platforms now with Spotify. And the first thing all of the brands and agencies said was, well, I can't buy it now. And then you ask them, weren't you 6 months ago saying attribution doesn't go far enough? Weren't you saying that RSS isn't enough and download isn't enough and we want listens? And they said, yeah, I mean, we're not happy with it, but we can't get rid of it. We need it still. We built up around it, and we intend to continue to expand on it. So it's kind of been nice to see that. But there's no solution for attribution in video. YouTube, there's no pixels in YouTube.
No, but we're running to, I guess we're running to an audience, right? Like we have been very good as an industry. Radio also is very good at this as an industry of like assuming that there will be something positive for us on the other side. And there's a lot of people and publishers that kind of hold out to go, no, well, we want to control our RSS feed. We want to control our audience, want to control our monetization, want to be able to measure it, want to be able to give those data points back to brands, etc. But there's a real tasty audience sitting over there, and like, is the ROI just a view or a download? And will we like build it later? I think is the mentality that we're all kind of going on at the moment. But I mean, it's there. Like I think we can't not run towards video.
I think it's going to be really interesting as well to see how YouTube analytics integrate into hosting platforms at the end of the day, and specifically, like, how are we going to push video from hosting platforms so it's all in one place, so it's a better user experience? I know there's a few folks working on that, which is great. And then also, how do we take the YouTube analytics and try to merge it into one platform? Not necessarily in terms of normalizing the data. Obviously, they're different data points. They come from different places. But how do we put it in a user-centric platform where folks can understand and see, okay, is my impact on YouTube greater than my impact on audio versus maybe somewhere else? I think that's going to be really the future of where podcasting goes, because at the end of the day, it's not just audio anymore.
But it's hard as well with walled gardens because they're not going to give you all that data back. And so all of a sudden you're going to have this bifurcated audience, and for brands and buyers, and they're saying, hey, we want to measure, like, how are we going to like measure ROI? You're going to go, well, it's a little different depending on where my show is, but it's all a podcast, but it is different here and there. And this is why we will continue having conferences and answering these tough challenges, and why we will all remain employed.
But that's the fun part about it, is that like if they come in through podcasting, they have these preconceived notions about attribution and the technology that we built. And sometimes I think we might have built a noose for ourselves, because if they come in through video, they're just like vanity URLs. It's like, okay, that works. And that's great. And that works for them. And they spend great money, and they're not struggling to buy on those YouTube shows. But then they're like, oh, but on podcast, we need a prefix URL. And we kind of built ourselves into a corner because the other channels don't have it. I remember vividly being in rooms talking about attribution, and like the social and search team would like be in the corner and look up and be like, why are we here? Like, we can't pixel this, we can't click track it, like, can we get out of here? And it's grown a little bit, but you still really can't do that. Sharon, you like, through Omni, through Triton, through everything you guys have done, I think the biggest thing you've done is aggregate analytics. I mean, you guys have one of the biggest repositories with Demos Plus, which is like a really in-depth understanding of the podcast ecosystem. You have your ranker. You have a killer relationship in Australia where Triton is the default currency for the audio side. How are you hearing that? Like, how are the pressures being brought up around like all the things that people want to call a podcast and where they fit into the analytics that we've all created here?
That is a good question. I mean, most of our measurement, so like on the rankers, they've always been download based. We've just today launched out like a new survey based, and then we're including the demographic information in there. And that's kind of based on a massive survey of like 12,000 or 15,000 people every 3 months. I think that the download is like the base, like that. And that has been like, we need something to work from that we then layer on so that we can kind of reach new heights. Great podcast that also reached new heights this week when they blew up on YouTube. And we pull that data in. We can look at views alongside downloads. We can look at the demographics, not through YouTube, obviously, because of aforementioned walled gardens. And then our job is to try and blend them all together. And I don't have a great answer, but the honest answer is it's really complicated because like it is such like there's not one single pane of glass that you can look through, and all the information comes in differently.
Yeah, what's funny is they say like, okay, you gotta look at media mix, then you look at vanity metrics, then you gotta look at downloads, impressions. It's like, they're like, oh, you gotta triangulate. I'm like, I think it needs to be a different word, like quadrangulation or something, something in that magnitude, because if you're just looking at it myopically, like you're gonna struggle. But for a decade, it took people to be like, this is a traditional channel. I think billions of dollars has now justified that, but now it's really about the path forward. And I think we've kind of earned the right, as you said, Bryan, to like, okay, we might have created a little bit of a noose, but that's because we're hitting that inflex of like, okay, you're going to go from 4 to 10 billion. Well, guess what? If video is pushing in this direction, like you got to go on top of that. Okay, there's going to be closed wall gardens. That might create some restrictions for some clients, but prepping the campaign before you go live. Like I think people are fast to rush things to market without understanding like what's your true KPI and like how fast do you want to see it, a response, and what are you looking for? And then it's like, are you able to measure even directionally in a 360 sphere of influence? Like if you don't ask those questions, like you might start off and like just shoot yourself in the foot right out of the gates.
I just think you need a North Star, right? Like there was a session that we did in, where was that? You put all those people in that room in Los Angeles. Oh, and like there's so many metrics, right? And there's so many different things that brands and agencies are asking for. And I forget who it was, and I wouldn't tell their name anyway. But like someone put their hands up when an advertiser was like, well, I mean, like, I want all this data. He's like, I've got all the data. What do you need? Like, I'll give you anything you want in any format that you want. And I think we're now like in this arms race between Spotify and YouTube, and we are the ants scurrying around in this like pending nuclear holocaust. And like I think that we need to be retaining some element of our own data and then figure out what it is that you want to be reporting back up. Like if you do 100% want to grow a video audience and that's where you want to drive, then views and watch time are what you should be reporting back up. If you want to build an audience across like media, like different channels, then you kind of want to be getting to like a single reach number so that you can say, hey, I'm accessing this amount of people like every day. If you are building a branded content, apart from number of times your CEO mentions the podcast, if they love it a lot, like you might obviously want to bring out some sort of data around like who's the audience and like how has that led to traffic. And so I think that there's heaps and heaps of different areas that you could be pulling data from, and it is complicated, but try and cut all that noise out and figure out what it is that you need to grow your show or your network and how you need to partner with brands or agencies or tech to get there, and focus on that. And then maybe don't get so intensely worried about all the rest.
Do you think we can get towards one big number?
I wasn't expecting a follow-up question.
Oh, well, it's everybody. No, I mean, I think a lot about, Libsyn used to put out the average CPMs. And I think it's fair to say that the first time it came out, everyone was like, no,
No.
And then the next quarter they put it out and it's like, well, it's directional and it's close enough. And then the third time we're all quoting it in headlines because it was there and it was consistent and it was enough to build off of. And people would say, that's what they do and it's blended. Here's why ours are different. And it was a good standing point. I think a lot about the difference between the download, which I am part in the camp of people that are like the download should die. I get it, but everybody up here transacts on it and that's how everybody makes you money. So maybe just don't focus on it if you don't like it. Let us focus on it, I think. There are other audience metrics that are incredibly valuable for growing your show, like Sharon said. But if, the average view completion rate for an audio podcast is 70 to 80%, does that mean that like a download should be 0.8 value? And if on video it's like 20 to 30%, should it be 0.2? Can we get to a point where we could blend all of this and have like a...
No. I mean, radio's done this for years, right? Like, you can be a single survey and every single radio network will be like, I want to focus on this one. I am number one in this very niche market. I am number one for, like, people that over-index for this thing. And so you just take the data and you turn it into what it is that you need to sell that show. If your average completion rate when you're looking at Apple and Spotify is not 70% or more, do not mention it if you can help it. And instead focus on what, like, it is that grows your show. You hate that though because you're like, I'm going to ask all the...
I think look, it's different. Have a little bit of an advantage with billions of dollars of data to be like, so you can say it's a 20% complete, but if it's hitting the KPI for the client based on what they track, would I prefer it to be higher? Absolutely. We would obviously denote that, but I think it's calling out the positives, obviously, from that perspective. But all those data points, every single show is its own ecosystem. So you can't just be like, I'm going to copy this, and then it's 100% going to be that way. And if you do that, that is going to be a little scary. But all you can do is make directional educational recommendations. Now that there's more data, yes, you might have to look at 5 sources to like figure out what's the best way to like recommend a show. But like, if you think about it, people come in, they're like, I know the top 10 shows and all the ones that are moving around in the marketplace. Like, yeah, that's great. If you're building a podcast campaign, that's a fraction, and you're likely not going to start there. You're going to have to start and then work your way up from that perspective.
First off, I take offense, Sharon, as a number one, a 1% Listen Notes podcast in business, marketing in Portland, Oregon. I really am offended.
I'm so sorry. Oh my gosh, wow.
No, but I agree with you. I think people look for the number that makes them look best. Bart, you said every podcast is different, and oh man, I wish we could time travel, because 2 years ago we were all on stage and we're like, it's reach. We got to get everybody. We got to frequency cap it. And now everybody's like, it's depth. If you can't go deep into there, if they're not waking up, if the podcaster's not waking up wearing your branded like clothing and bed sheets and excited about it on other socials.
Let's just tattoo our listeners and then start transacting on how many of your listeners have got your like podcast name tattooed on their body.
You're gonna put a QR code on there?
but right, like it's like I think we nailed reach. I think as an industry, like I would love everybody to like take a moment and say like, hey, we did that really well.
But now we need deduped reach across like video, and like especially with Spotify and YouTube with like these again walled gardens. The pressure from us as an industry should be on them to say you have to give us data back so that we can crunch a single number to say how many people am I like unless we can do that, then I agree that we should be doing something else.
And Allison, like the
Stephanie.
The brand, Stephanie, sorry, I'm so sorry. Stephanie, the brands that you're working with, do they want to get this granular with all of that data from all of those different sources? Do some of them obsess over specific ones versus others? Like, what's the general feeling for them? Like,
yeah. I mean, it really depends on the show, right? And I think it kind of comes back to what everyone's saying here. It really depends on your objective at the end of the day. Every show is so different in terms of what they're trying to do. Some shows will get ROI from inviting a strategic guest on their show and closing a deal because they warmed up that lead for 45 minutes and were able to talk their ear off face to face, right? So that's one way. You can also look at quantifying it through like the metrics like we were talking about. You can also look at quantifying it versus reach. I know we have a few clients that really love their vanity metrics and they want to be the top charts and they want those metrics so they can go back to their boss and look really good, right? So it really depends on the show ultimately. We try to focus on, are we hitting the right audience, number one, and is the episode being consumed as far as possible? Because ultimately in branded content, like the podcast itself is kind of an ad. So that's really the biggest thing that we're looking at, but it just depends on the show, like I said.
Yeah, you sitting up here thinking you guys are all crazy because branded content doesn't need to worry about half the stuff that you're talking about?
Not crazy, no.
Interesting.
I feel like every podcast is an ad to convince you to listen to the next episode. Like I think anybody who believes they're not associated with advertising or anything is completely misleading. It's just like how you go about it. All right, the last question, and then we'll open up for some Q&A here is, are we hearing from brands more about branded content? Whether branded segments, whether mini episodes, whether full podcasts themselves, like is that an interest that we're getting more of?
I guess, I mean, defining what branded content is, but I think there are.
Do they want their own podcast feed?
That depends on the type of brand it is and like what are they trying to get across? Are they trying to tell a story? Do they just want to be present in market? Obviously, there's brands that will do. I want to allocate X% predetermined on their side to run reach and branded based campaigns. But like, okay, well, is that your goal, or are you trying to educate and tell a story over time? So I think it really depends on the timing, because a lot of clients have seasonality from that. So some might want to focus around that. But what are you trying to do? Are you trying to educate, or are you trying to do reach? Those are two very different things. You could do it in 60 seconds. So yeah, we'll do our best, obviously, on how we message that. But do you want to tell something more about a story? Is it about engaging with the community that you're building? Because a lot of clients, that a lot of their decisions also tied to like CRM and like what are people saying about the brand. And guess what? That's also additionally hard to track, but branded affinity is very important. And then you have to look at it. Okay, I'm going to invest in this. It's going to tell a story, and this is the reach. Or do I just like shotgun spread it across the board? And those are very different, but they can also work symbiotically too.
Awesome. Can we give it up for the panelists? Does anybody have any questions? No? Everybody is an expert on attribution. Oh, we got more over there. There we go. And again, thank you guys for choosing to come to this panel. I know you could go to a bunch of other stuff, so we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hey, Bryan. Harry Duran, host of Podcast Junkies. Thanks for the panel. That was very helpful. I was curious, when brands are looking at stats, there's a lot of question about, you just mentioned downloads earlier. So downloads, views, when you start to combine them together, because we're doing some combined dashboards for clients, we're showing you the YouTube stuff and we're showing them the downloads. Is it important to break it out so you're telling the truth about what's happening? Because one isn't, I've heard them described as engagement metrics or consumption metrics. And so what's the language we should be using when we're showing these as an aggregate?
I want to jump in, but I want to let you too. Like I like traffic versus audience. I think that's really important to separate the two, because neither are bad things. They're just separate things. Download is traffic, right? Your audience is the other metrics.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I always say that downloads is the number of plays. It is not your unique listeners or the individuals that are actually tuning in. So I think that's really important to separate it out. I think it's also important to understand what the definition of each metric is that you're trying to unify. So everyone has a different definition, right? Plays on Spotify are not the same thing as an IAB certified download. So you don't want to merge those two together because they shouldn't be measured equally. They're two different things. So in that case, I would definitely try to, separate those out.
I would just say, yes, absolutely. Separate them out, because there's shows that might be 60%, 70% video and 30% audio. And if you don't know that and you might target, or the brand might think about the show differently and how they want to advertise. And it's like, oh, maybe I want to lean more on a visual component, product placement, things of that nature too.
Transparency.
Hi, guys. I'm really glad this panel happened today. How much is ad clutter coming into the conversation? How saturated the ads of each individual podcast may or may not be?
All the time.
Yeah, there is an initiative that is starting up, which is to give pod load, which sounds filthy now that I've said it out loud.
Yeah, we probably need to change that.
Yeah, we should change that. Wow. But I have a mixed view on this. I think on one hand, it's kind of like advertisers who, no offense to them, okay, if you can say, hey, this show has got 6 ads, and so I should be in the first slot, it almost feels like they're trying to, if you don't want any other ads around you, there's a solution for that, and it's called buying a sponsorship. It's called putting your hand in your pocket and paying more money so that you buy run of show, run of network, right? And so I think that there are some things we should be really thoughtful about as an industry in terms of contributing to that kind of narrative. The fact is that really good shows are really sold out, and there's money can be exchanged for goods and services, and one of those services is exclusivity on a show.
For sure, ad clutter, but also how are those ads delivered? If you say 6, what does that mean? Is it a radio ad pod and they're going back to back to back? That's very different. So how you think about it, there is scientific math that you start to calculate. And if you don't know that, you're also kind of guessing going into the test.
I agree. And again, I think it comes down to who you're working with. And like to your question, like it's about being transparent and offering people like what do they want, how many voices do they want, and everything comes with a different rate card. But I think you should always err on the side of be upfront about how a show is like advertised, I think.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. We'll be hanging out right over there for a little bit afterwards. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.